Sometimes we do wild stories, right? Today's story is absolutely insane. I'm sure there'll be plenty of people to comment and, pretty much say how you feel, whether or not you think this brother should have got a second chance. This is about the Peeler brothers out of Bridgeport, Connecticut. A long time ago, they decided, you know what? We're going to live this street life. Their mother was a cop, but they decided, you know what? We're all in. And when I say all in the end, there's an 8-year-old little boy named BJ that gets clipped. He gets eliminated, no longer here, and his 29-year-old mother. All because BJ had witnessed one of the Peeler brothers get rid of the dude that allegedly was BJ's father, at the very least was his mother's boyfriend. But listen to the story. Tell me what you think in the comments. Do you think this dude should have been released on clemency from Joe Biden? Sometimes people are given gifts only because those in power overlook things. Adrian Peeler had tried his hand and was wondering if Biden might overlook the facts and throw him a second chance. Why not try? He had nothing else to lose. After all, he had already sat in the state prison system all these years, doing 25 years for smoking an 8-year-old boy, Leroy B.J. Brown, and his mother, Karen Clark. But after that 25, he had the 35 years to do in the feds for the same shit. Well, at least his federal paperwork looked like the 35 piece was for selling crack. On April 9, 2022, Adrian would leave state prison and get to the feds. There, he would fill out a federal clemency form and shoot it to Biden. He had nothing to lose. Only two things could happen. It could get better or stay the same. There in the 1990s, Adrian, along with his brother Russell Peeler, were the leaders of a large-scale drug trafficking operation in Bridgeport, Connecticut. They decided that they would be at the top of the food chain in Bridgeport. If anyone was going to get money here, it was going to be the Peeler brothers. And if anyone got in the way, they would hit them, like Biggie said, 2 to the head. For the Peeler brothers, no one was off limits when it came to this street shit. The boy's mother, Sheila Peeler, was a cop who had tried to raise her sons to be law-abiding citizens, but they had went off the path she was paving. Russell was all in, and in the 1980s, he had joined the Bush Mob, an intense drug gang, where he would learn the ins and outs of getting money in the drug trade. He wanted all he could get, and in 1993, as his mother lay dying, she would ask the brothers to use the 50 stacks she was leaving them to go to school and get a degree. But Russell, he had no plan to honor his dying mother's wishes. Instead, he took the bread and got some work. When Biggie was on the jukebox in the early 1990s, the brothers would listen to him rap while dreaming of getting rich, stuffing poison in small bags. Poison that would grip the Bridgeport, Connecticut area in a death grip. In November of 1995, Adrian was arrested for selling drugs. On January 1996, while on bond for the drug case, Adrian was arrested and charged with reckless endangerment and risk of injury for firing several rounds of a machine gun-type weapon into an apartment with 4 children, ranging in the age from 4 to 13. Even kids could get it if you crossed the Peeler brothers, and before long, they would demonstrate that. Prison would now become a part of Adrian's life. He would be sentenced to concurrent terms of 7 years imprisonment with 30 months to be served and 3 years probation. Small things to a giant. He could serve that time standing on his head, but it still hurt when he was in the midst of getting money. But he knew the neighborhood, knew he wasn't afraid to bust his gun, that people better respect the Peeler brothers or get their cabbage peeled. It was all the price that he had to pay to have that status. With the snows falling at Hartford, Connecticut in February 1998, Adrian would find himself leaving prison to go to a halfway house, with plans to get back into the game. There was money left for him to get, and he wanted to get it. By April 1998, he had enough of the halfway house and people trying to tell him what to do. Fuck it. He was a natural-born leader, and having these lames tell him what to do and getting in his way was over with. Adrian would escape the halfway house and make his way back to Bridgeport with his brother Russell. They would put a spot together on George Street, selling dime bags and some weight. Adrian thought that other people in the hood were scared of him, but some wanted the same things he wanted, as much money as they could get. Beef in the streets was at an all-time high, and nothing was fair in love and war. Other dealers were letting cops know who was pumping out of George Street, and the cops would start pulling over customers and eventually shut the house down. But in the crack game, new houses were easy to come by, and before long, Marina Village would be the next location. As the money came in and they were counting 1,000 stacks, envy and competition would heat up. Threats in the street were real, and in the end, only the strongest would survive. Adrian would be shot in both of his legs. Whether perpetrators wanted to kill him or leave a message was up for debate. But the one thing that wasn't, Adrian had 2 bad legs. Adrian would live and his blood would boil, that someone would test him in his hood by hitting him in both legs. Nothing would stop him, and after leaving the hospital, that he had checked into under a fictitious name, he would find a new house on Lincoln Ave. The brothers would turn Lincoln Ave into a stash house, and they would arm themselves with all kinds of weapons, vowing to never get caught slipping again. The streets were theirs for the taking. Choppers and automatic weapons were bought, and the word was out that if you came looking for Adrian and his brother, or if you wanted something that belonged to them, they would put you to sleep. They were locked and loaded at all times, from AR-15s to AK-47s. The brothers were known to let their guns go off. On September 2nd, 1997, Russell would unload on another man that had owed him money, Rudolph Rudy Sneed. The two had once upon a time been getting money together. Rudy was supplying Russ with work. It was all powder, and Russ would rock it up. The two had a falling out over Russ believing that Rudy was pocketing too much money from profits off of his man. I know how it feels to wake up fucked up, pockets broke as hell, another rock to sell. People look at you like you's the user, selling drugs to all the losers, mad Buddha abuser. But they don't know about your stress-filled day, baby on the way, mad bills to pay. That's why you drink Tanqueray, so you can reminisce and wish you wasn't living so devilish. Shit, I remember, I was just like you, smoking blunts with my crew, flipping over 62s. But they were far beyond 62s. But if someone needed a deuce or a big that they knew, they might look out. Big money plans for the brothers, and they never thought this shit would end as they sit over the flames on the stove, swishing the yellow oil around as they turned powder into base. The iron stand house was doing at least a brick a week alone. With plenty of money and power, the brothers thought they were unstoppable. And there was a code to live by out here in these streets. If you violated, you had to get dealt with. Rudy Sneed was a man that had to be dealt with, according to Russ. But one of those people was Rudolph Sneed, who owed money and was trying to walk Russ like Russ was not about that life. On September 2nd, 1997, Russell seen Rudy in a car with two children, one of them, Leroy B.J. Brown. Russ would unleash a volley of shots at the car. Bang, bang, bang. The kids would cover their ears and scream out in fear, believing that Rudy had just been killed. But luck would be on Rudolph Sneed's side, at least for today, and he would survive. Russell would be arrested for the shooting, but with money for the right lawyers, he would soon find himself out on bail for the brazen shooting. With anger in his blood, he again would seek out Rudolph and find him. This time, Russell would be lucky, and Rudy would not be. On May 29, 1998, Russell would use the same gun to eliminate Rudy. On May 29, 1998, Russell threw a denim jacket over his head to conceal his face and walked into a barbershop on Boston Avenue in Bridgeport, Connecticut. Rudolph was in the back, and Russell would walk up to him and shoot him multiple times as he lifted his hands to cover his head. This time, Rudy would meet his maker. In December 1998, Russell learned that Leroy Brown and his mother had provided statements to the Bridgeport Police Department, which would link him to the attempted murder of Sneed. Russell began to inquire about killing Brown and Clark to prevent the little boy from testifying against him. He wanted his brother Adrian to handle that business and keep it straight. Russell believed that if his brother eliminated the boy and his mother, that the prosecution could not win. Initially, Adrian Peeler declined to kill Brown and Clark, but on January 6, 1999, he was heard telling Russell that he would take care of it. Both the mother and the boy were afraid to give a statement to the police, but after all, it was her kid's father. Karen Clark would give a statement to the police implicating Russell Brown in killing BJ's father, and so would 8-year-old BJ. Karen afterwards was afraid to go outside, and when she did, she was always looking over her shoulder. She had wanted to move, but money was tight. The family was stuck in Bridgeport with nowhere to run. As Christmas passed, they tried to make the best of the holidays after losing Rudy, but fear still resonated inside of them in their home. On January 7, 1999, Adrian would commit to protecting the image that he and his brother projected, that no one was to cross them in these streets, not even kids. The plan was in motion and Adrian was creeping today. He would become his brother's keeper. In the early evening of January 7, 1999, 29-year-old Karen Clark and her son, 8-year-old Leroy B.J. Brown, had just gotten back to their Bridgeport, Connecticut home from grocery shopping. She had always been watching her back, afraid that someone would come for her. Not her son, but her for sure. The days were gloomy, and many were filled with fear and tears for Rudy. Today would be the day that her fears would become her reality. At 29 years old, she would lose her life and be unable to protect her son. Russell would bribe one of his customers, Josephine Lee, with a few bags of crack to let him know when Karen came home with her son. Josephine would page Russ when Karen was walking up the steps. She lived across the street and was watching out the window. Her curtains parted. She locked in on the victim. Adrian was there within 5 minutes, and he and Josephine would walk up to the house where she would ring the doorbell, and Adrian would knock simultaneously. They were getting ready to bring their bags upstairs when a young man then burst in, and Karen noticed he was holding a gun. That man was Adrian. She began screaming at her son to run, and the two frantically ran up the stairs when shots were fired. She would feel the hot lead hit her body as she stumbled forward, reaching for the phone, reaching for help that she would never find. The shooter would pump the finishing shots into her as 8-year-old BJ screamed for his mommy. The assassin, with no remorse, would then fire a single shot into BJ's head, taking his life along with his mother's. The police would arrive within minutes, but it was all over with by the time they got there. Initially, they thought it was a robbery gone bad, but investigators would piece it together and realize that 8-year-old Leroy BJ was a star witness in the murder of Rudolph Sneed Jr. and was supposed to testify in court just days later. BJ and his mother were now silenced. On January 14, 1999, Russell would be arrested for the murders of Brown and Clark. On that same day, Adrian would board a train headed for North Carolina. 7 days later, the FBI would put metal bracelets on his wrist, and he would be heading back to Connecticut. Prosecutors would charge Russell, and this time, there was no winning or getting out of the trial. The cops would round up his homies and associates, and before long, they would tell the cops that Russell kept saying how he was going to kill BJ to prevent him from testifying against him. Based on his friend's testimony, he would be convicted. There was testimony from Damian Clark, Sean Kennedy, Angelina King, and Corey King about the prolific and dangerous drug operation led by the Peeler brothers. At the trial in 2000, the jury would deadlock on whether or not he should get the death penalty. The state Supreme Court later ordered a new death penalty hearing with a new jury. After being convicted on October 15, 2007, Russell was sentenced and given the death penalty on December 10, 2007. But he too would find some luck in 2016. Russell was resentenced to life in prison without the possibility of release because the state abolished the death penalty. He was also sentenced to 105 years in prison for killing Sneed. Adrian Peeler was found guilty by a Waterbury jury of conspiracy to commit murder and was sentenced to 25 years in prison on the state side. This was to be followed by a 35-year federal prison sentence for drug dealing. Federal Judge Neves would say at sentencing, "There isn't a lot that needs to be said about this. I knew in my heart what the defendant did, and he does too. He might not be the worst that I've ever met in this world, but he's right up there. This crime was committed for an evil motive. The victims were innocent people, a child and his mother. This scheme was senseless, represents a lot of what's wrong with our society: use of drugs, the prevalence of guns, individuals like Peeler and his brother who have no morals, no values. Anyone who would be willingly involved in an offense of this nature is a monster. The victims should have been allowed to live their lives happily. That's every American's right. The little boy should have been getting ready for a summer of Little League baseball and swimming in a lake, riding a bike, and he won't because you were involved in a scheme to kill him and his mother. In comparison to the two innocent lives lost here, a review of the defendant's life reveals that it is without meaning or merit. There's a list of negatives with no positives. He is an extremely dangerous and cruel and heartless person. Jails were made for people like Adrian Peeler and his brother, the judge would say. Quite frankly, it's difficult to think of him as a person with a soul or with any kind of human feelings. He's a self-centered, self-absorbed coward. When looking for compassionate release, Adrian would outline all of his accomplishments years later. Letters from faculty at Yale and family members supporting his release. But the court would hear none of it. The court would deny relief. Absent from his request was any remorse for BJ and his mother. But in January 2025, Adrian would not need clemency or compassionate release. Before leaving office, President Biden would commute Adrian's sentence, and he is scheduled to leave FCI McDowell on July 16, 2025. Bridgeport, Connecticut. Here he comes. Pretty crazy case, right? I mean, I want you to leave a comment. Tell me what you think. You think this dude should have ever got out of prison? I will tell you, in his compassionate release motion, he's got a long list of programs that he's done. He's rehabilitated, or it seems that way. Pretty much stayed out of the way, helping other people. People from Yale are writing letters on his behalf. Do you think that Adrian Peeler should have got out of prison? Or do you feel like Joe Biden did the wrong thing on this case? Weigh in, leave a comment, let me know what you think. I think it's an absolutely wild case. But definitely want to hear from you and definitely appreciate everybody Road Watch TV with respect. Until tomorrow.